When we do the Lamrim meditation on our precious human life, one of the advantages that we contemplate is having born in a place where there is the Dharma. I think in some lists it's listed as the central land of the Dharma. And for some of us, actually, to be born in a place where the Dharma exists didn't happen at the time of our birth. We were in countries where there wasn't access to the Dharma when we were born. For many of us, I think. One of the qualities also is to have inner faith or an inner interest in things like the Dharma. And so somehow during the course of our lives, that spiritual longing, that seed of the Dharma, that's such a precious thing with which we are born, that makes our human life a precious life, one of the things, came together with being in a place where we had access to the Dharma. And along with other conditions that ripened a seed in us that made us pursue today, exploring monastic life. And I bring this up because to bring to our mind how important it is to know that this did not happen by accident. It didn't happen randomly. It didn't happen causelessly. But somewhere, sometime, maybe many times, in the previous lives of the continuity of the consciousness that now runs through whatever we call ourselves, we created the causes to have that seed of Dharma in our hearts, to be born in a place where the Dharma eventually came, to be able to meet the teachings. This came about as a result of virtuous actions. And so to really rejoice in the opportunities that we have all freedoms and fortunes that bring about a precious human life. And right now, in this moment, we have this opportunity to explore it, to see where the Dharma takes us, to see where we take the Dharma with us. And at this time, we also can look around and so easily see that this is really rare. Even the people we love the most probably don't have all these conditions. And if we look at the larger Buddhist view of how we are so dependent on all beings, not just the ones that we care about right now, how dependent we are on the kindness and the services of living beings everywhere. Let's take this session and this practice and this life to do what we can to use this precious opportunity that we ourselves created the causes for. To use it in a way that helps us propel along the path to realize our full potential. And to do it with the sincere and fervent wish to be able to make such a situation possible for every living being. And we have to become a Buddha to do that. So set that as our goal. Okay, can you hear me and is it clear enough? It sounds a little distorted to me, no? Okay. I wanted to combine a couple of things today. One is I wanted to introduce all of us and reintroduce some of us to the founding Dharma principles of Sravasti Abbey. And the other thing is to work on a topic that I think might be shared fairly broadly, and that is, am I worthy? Am I good enough to do this? which starts way before we think about becoming a monastic, and I think probably, catch me if I'm wrong, continues for a while, a very long while. Yeah, so I wanted to combine those two issues and look at this worthiness issue, but also look at the founding Dharma principles to use them as a resource for antidotes. So my experience, first of all, was when in Seattle, when I was a student of Venerable Children's, way long time ago, she was the only monastic that I knew. And she very kindly, very generously brought her great teachers to Seattle to also teach at Dharma Friendship Foundation. So Geshe Sopa came, and Geshe Tupten came, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche came, and we had fabulous teachers. And those are the only monastics I knew. So the first time, actually Venerable's the one that mentioned it. She said, you love the Dharma. You might want to think about ordaining. First of all, I really loved what I was doing. I was not interested in separating from any of that. But the other thing that really stayed with me was that I could see this person had amazing qualities. She was so kind, she was so learned, she was so generous with her teaching, she was, had this bodhicitta aspiration that just radiated from her body. She was refined, she had a lot of beautiful qualities. And I thought, I am not that. I am not that. This is a crazy thought. End of thought. I will say, when she invited Venerable Robina Corton to come teach, I thought I had more chance. Now, I love Venerable Robina. That's not a slash of her. It's just that it's a completely different personality. She's kind of out there. She also holds the Dharma so fully in her heart. She radiates bodhicitta, and she does it with a kind of personality, right? So I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a chance. But still, I don't have those qualities. Therefore, forget it. So this idea about, am I good enough? Am I worthy? How many people here have that? How many people who have been ordained for a while still have traces of that? Yeah, am I still worthy? Am I still good enough? Good enough, well, worthy of what? Good enough for what? Is kind of like question number one. I wanted to go back and look up what does worthy mean. So worthy is having or showing the qualities or abilities that merit recognition in a specified way. It's kind of a dry definition. Second definition, deserving effort, attention, or respect. Deserving is the key word here. Do I deserve something? And the third one is good enough or suitable. Now, in my mind, am I good enough to be a monastic is different from am I suitable to be a monastic, but they just have a different flavor. I think meaning-wise, it's a little bit the same. Am I good enough? Am I suitable? And so, what does it mean to be worthy? And how good do you have to be a Buddhist monastic? Where does that idea even come from? How good do we have to be? And according to whose idea? Against whom are we measuring ourselves? And so I just will say from my own experience, this is an extreme obstacle to practice. This idea of being good enough in all sorts of different times and ways. And it's a big self-centered thought at work, actually. But it takes a while to come down to recognize that. So it can be, your presence can be very blatant. We can have this kind of, I'm just not good enough, or everybody knows it, and we say out loud, I know I'm not good enough, and, it's obvious. But it can also be quite subtle. Even the sense of sort of, I know everything and I'm going to correct everybody because I know the right way, also can have underneath it, I'm not good enough and neither are you. Or I'm not good enough, but I do know this, so I'm better than you. Or, those kinds of thoughts underneath, operating. And so it presents as anxiety, it presents as self-doubt, it presents as holding back, and it also presents as not speaking up. Or we try to excel in our job. That way, it's like this sense of, if I prove myself in my work, that means I'm good enough. If I stand out in a certain way, it means I'm good enough. But the problem with that is that no matter what we do, if we have the mind of I'm not good enough, we're never good enough. Because the only person we're really trying to prove this to is ourselves. Nobody else has that question. Believe it or not. Nobody else is running around saying, well, I don't know, are you good enough to be a man? Are you good enough? I'm not sure. Are you good enough? Nobody's sitting there asking that question about you. About themselves, yes. About you, no. It's our own story. Am I good enough? Am I worthy? And I'm talking to this both for people who are thinking about ordination, because it really, I think, comes up in people's minds before as you're pursuing this. Do I need to be holy in some way? Do I need to have some level of purity? Have I purified enough? Am I good enough? And I think it also stays long after we are ordained. I think it gets more subtle. But as long as we're still seeking approval from anybody, especially our teacher, we're trying to be good enough. And it's debilitating. So that's what I want to talk about. So that's why I think that looking at the Abbey founding values, there are lots of antidotes, but looking at the Abbey founding values is a place that people can use as a resource to kind of study and examine the issues as they come up. So I asked Venerable Lamso at the very last minute if she would just put it, I want to show you where they are on the website. Ding. May as well give people a guide to find pages that will help them. Okay, so you see where it says monastic life up there on the menu bar? Click. Go down to where it says, I can't read it. Monastic mind. Click. Scroll down. Dharma principles for everyone. Non-harmfulness, compassion, generosity, mindfulness, gratitude and respect, rejoicing, humility and willingness to accept instruction. And what's missing from this list, I realize, and I don't know why, is apologizing and forgiving. There's an eighth one that didn't seem to make it to the website. It's just not there. So when Venerable Chödrön founded Sravasti Abbey, she was, you can probably tell, extremely thoughtful. She had thought of things and had written reams of things about what will be our values, how will we approach things, what will be the organization, will be the structure, not the organizational structure, but the Dharma structure. And these are things that were introduced from the very beginning. These are the foundational qualities that are the Dharma principles that belong to the Abbey. So in the original list, generosity came first. I think we moved it. Yeah, in the original list, generosity came first. Followed by non-harmfulness, then compassion, mindfulness, gratitude and respect, rejoicing, humility, and willingness to accept instruction, apologizing and forgiving. We don't have time today to really go through these super thoroughly. If there's another chance to in the course of the week, it's good to do that because they're so juicy. And looking at how each of these principles plays out in community life. And how if we're aware of them and we're aware of cultivating these in our own mind, then we have right there a toolbox for how to practice in community and how to live together. So that's why I wanted you to know where they are. I don't remember if I put them in the Rock Tumbler guide or not. I don't know if we have them in printed form somewhere, but we should. Maybe I should just take that on and make sure that we have these. And since these are Venerable's words. So I want to look at some of these as practicing them as antidotes to this not good enough mind. Thank you, Venerable Amsel. So now you know where they are. So here's some things I thought about. If I'm not good enough, then what? One result of that then is I'm not, that I doubt myself. If I'm not good enough, then I doubt myself. Yes, my growth. I doubt my practice. I don't think I am growing. I don't think I am practicing. How could I? I'm not good enough. Does that sound like a familiar mind, somebody? Yes. If I'm not good enough, then I am constantly comparing myself to others. How are they doing? Oh, they're doing better than I am. Oh, they're not quite as good as I am on that one. Oh, look, they messed up. I can rejoice about that because that makes me better. Now, what kind of mind is that? But it does come from not being good enough, right? Anybody not had that ever? Sure, we're comparing ourselves with others. If we're looking for praise and approval, also can be very subtle. When I was first, probably years, I may still do this, but at some point, Venerable Tarpa pointed out to me that in the stand-up meeting when Venerable Children used to attend, she said, you're always looking at her to see how she reacts to what you say. Well, that's embarrassing that somebody noticed, but also how nice of her to point it out. And it was true. It was really true. So look, watch. How much are we watching for the reaction of our teacher or our peers or the seniors to see how they're responding to what we've said or done? That's the not good enough mind. That's looking for that approval. Sometimes when we have the not good enough mind and we're in this situation of training, if somebody points out a fault or a mistake, even super gently, we crash inside. We just internally collapse, like, oh my God. We have different reactions. Some people just crash and cry. Some people crash and explode. Some people crash and disappear. We all have our strategies about how we deal with that little bit of perceived, not just correction. It might be a correction, but we perceive it as some kind of statement about who we are as human beings. And we crash. So we're not able to actually hear the training that's being offered. Sometimes if I'm not good enough, you may feel guilty when we do the food offering here. I'm not worthy of people's food. I'm not worthy of this offering that people are giving here. Sometimes out of not feeling worthy, we will break the rules and buy stuff for ourselves rather than take an offering from somebody else because I'm not worthy. Now, partly you may want to break the rules and do that because you want to buy what you want to buy. But there's also this sense of, I should never let them support me. I'll take care of myself. I'm not worthy of receiving their offering. Anybody had that? Yeah, definitely. So it's very hard, very, very hard to grow in the Dharma when we have this underneath. What else? What are some other ramifications of this not good enough mind? Think about it. I know some of you have really worked this. How they get in the way of our practice.
Not trying, because why? Because I've already suck.
Right. Not trying, because I'm already a disaster case. Not letting myself push a little bit harder to realize something. Or not believing that I can. then there's so many things. If they see the real me, if I reveal who I am, they'll throw me out. Yes? Yes. If I don't work real hard, work over hard, don't achieve, don't excel, don't do my job really, 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 really well, they'll throw me out. If my teacher doesn't encourage me with kind words, it means she does not support me and they want to throw me out. Yes? Anything else?
When they have meetings and I'm not included.
It's because I'm a disaster.
I don't have anything to say.
Yes, I have no power either. Right. So we can see how this eats underneath. I mean, it's so sneaky. You got one? Yeah. Oh, go.
A lot of doubt for anything.
Yeah.
A lot of doubt.
About yourself or the
About when taking decisions, instead of taking a decision, doubt.
Yeah.
This, that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's such a I don't know what the word is. It's just underneath this little kind of psychological hole inside. Like, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And that takes a lot of energy to have that little hum going and trying to override it all the time. Perform a little better. Be a little better. Oh, they didn't like that. I'll try this. I'm not so sure they're going to eat my rice anymore. I better make something else because, I mean, we can be not good enough about anything, about whether we mopped the floor correctly, about whether we, made breakfast correctly, and also about whether we're doing the Dharma correctly. Actually, Dharma comes kind of low on the list because people can't see that, we think. But we need self-confidence on the path. We absolutely have to have self-confidence in the path. We have to have confidence in liberation. We have to have confidence that we can be liberated. We have to have confidence to be bodhisattvas. His Holiness is often saying, Venerable Children often quotes him as saying, bodhisattvas have to have tremendous self-confidence to be able to do what they need to do. And we have to have confidence in our Buddha potential. So if we don't think we can become liberated or enlightened, then what's the point? So we must think we can, or we wouldn't be sitting here. And yet underneath there's this gnawing, eating up our potential for virtue. So it's good to really recognize it. Now, I looked up psychology. Psychology has lots of good reasons about why we have this. It all kind of boils down to, psychologically, some core beliefs that you develop as a child based on your early childhood experiences. Insecurity from absent parents, insecurity from insufficient parenting, or your parents were fabulous and you had a fabulous childhood, but they were super critical or perfectionistic, and you took it that way. That's one thing. I personally am a big fan of the original sin story too. I think everybody that grew up in a Christian culture, whether you grew up Christian or not, has embedded in our mind somewhere that we have this fundamental flaw from the get-go, that as soon as Adam and Eve got thrown out, we all got, we're just bad. And we have to spend the rest of our lives making it up so that, we don't burn in hell forever. You hear that when you're 3 or 4 or 5, that gets in there and sinks. But if we turn to the Dharma to look for the sources, I think it's actually more productive. It's not to say that therapy doesn't help. But if we also, Dharma can look at this too. So just looking at the nature of samsara itself, if we look at the list of the 6 sufferings of all living beings, number 1, there is no stability. Number 2, our mind is never satisfied. Lama Tsongkhapa calls it the fault of insatiability. So if we have this mind as part of our dukkha, it's just the nature of our dukkha. And we're constantly dissatisfied, constantly looking for something better, something better, something better. We're dissatisfied with ourselves too. Does that make sense? Constantly looking to feed this sense of craving for this pleasure, really. Insatiable for pleasure. That's what the Lamrim was saying, this craving for that. And so I think our own self-doubt comes from that, because I look at myself and I'm not perfect. I look at myself and my life isn't wonderful. I look at myself and my mind isn't beautiful. I look at myself and I'm full of afflictions. Never satisfied. Never satisfied. Another way to look at it too is in the 8 worldly dharmas, our craving for the pleasure of praise, our craving for the pleasure of a good reputation, our just despising criticism, being terrified of having a bad reputation, being driven in that worldly way. And if we look at ourselves, we don't measure up. We don't measure up to some ideal, some idea, some ideal. And, Venerable also talks about this hole inside that we're constantly trying to fill, that insatiable need to be loved, that insatiable need to be approved of, to have a place. And I wonder too, she may have put this thought in my head, that there's this some sort of sneaking suspicion that we don't really exist the way we think we do. Anyway, might be way down inside. That's why they talk about craving for annihilation, to get rid of the pain, but also to blank that out. So we have to recognize what's going on in our minds before we can address it. And I think it's extremely useful to bring this to the surface and own it, and also recognize that everybody, almost everybody, seems to have it. Right away, if everybody seems to have it, then I'm not alone, right? Furthermore, it's not so embarrassing to reveal, because it's kind of shameful too. Who wants to say, I don't feel so good about myself, and I don't really want you to know I don't feel so good about myself, because it's kind of crummy to not so feel good about yourself, and who's going to judge me if I don't feel so good about myself? And I'm not going to tell you I don't feel so good about myself, but I'll get myself bigger, stronger, puffed up, better, and then you'll never know. Are any of us fooled by that? No. No. If we know that about each other, if we acknowledge that about each other, then our compassion for each other, and also our, our solidarity in a way, to come together and go, okay, this is another way that we can support each other to overcome the self-centered thought that is making us grasp at this. There's a tricky piece to it too, because, practicing the Dharma means transforming our minds. That's flat out what it means. Transforming our minds. In order to transform our minds, we have to acknowledge our own faults. We can't acknowledge our own faults honestly if we are constantly denying them so that we don't look bad to ourselves. It takes self-confidence to acknowledge that we have faults. Then we have to have the self-confidence to think that we can do something about them. So one little method, kind of an outline for examining this, is at first we have to separate. We are not our faults. I was thinking about this yesterday. I have this real, it's not funny, it's just something I've learned to experience. If I'm a little bit intimidated by someone, there's almost a guarantee that I will do something to mess up. Absolutely, just will. No matter how conscious I am, no matter how careful I am, no matter how, even aware I am that I have this, I will make a mistake. So yesterday I was sending a thank you letter to Venerable Children's brother, who makes a generous offering annually. And I even had this in my mind. I thought, okay, so make sure you proof this, that it doesn't have any typos, it's completely good. I'm a terrible typist, so I have a real problem with this. And I don't see that well either. The letter was good, it was really clear. And then I sent it off, and then I realized there was a mistake in the amount. The letter was gone. I mean, immediately. Fortunately, I've done this so many times. It's like, okay, I just immediately wrote, oh, sorry, correction. I'll send you a correction in just a moment. I didn't apologize. I didn't do anything. Whereas earlier in my life, I would have gone, oh, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I'll make the correction right away. I'll be back to you in a few minutes. So, okay, level 1, I didn't respond with all of that blah, blah. I just fixed it. Level 2, it's still the sneaky underneath self-sabotage action that made the mistake. Okay, finally, I can say, okay, I saw it, I didn't see it, here it is, it's okay. But in order to be able to do that, we have to learn that we are not our faults. Our faults do not reflect who we are. If we walk around with the identity that I'm an angry person, or if we walk around with the identity that I'm the kind of person that's sick all the time, or we walk around with the identity that says I'm a klutz, which I am, but it doesn't have to be who I am. And I don't have to apologize for something that I haven't been able to correct yet. If I use it to harm you, of course I do. But it just, like, I don't have to apologize to exist. Do you know what I mean? Do people have a thing like, I have to apologize to exist? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm here. Yeah? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I messed up. Oh, I'm sorry, I put the tomato on the plate when I should have put the potato on the plate. It's okay. We have to accept that we have faults and that we are not our faults. That's number 1. We also have to accept them that they are normal. It's normal to have faults. If we didn't have faults, we wouldn't need to take precepts, for one thing. If we didn't have faults, we wouldn't be ordinary human beings. True? Do you know anybody who is a faultless human being? Probably His Holiness. His staff might have different thoughts about that. He says he's quite strict with his staff. I don't know. I wouldn't at all begin to conjecture that. And I think in part, when we're working with this self-esteem issue, there's an arrogance in there that believes, I'm not an ordinary being. I shouldn't have faults. I shouldn't make mistakes. People shouldn't see my faults either, or my mistakes, nor point them out. But for sure, the bottom line there is really this belief that I shouldn't have them. If I have them, I'm not okay. If I have them, something's wrong with me. And the more we meditate on the Dharma, I believe, and think about every living being, every ordinary being, is controlled by what? Karma and afflictions. Am I something different? I'm not controlled by my karma and afflictions? Somehow, I should be different? Should be. Otherwise, there's something wrong with me. Is that a little bit arrogant? Is that a lot arrogant? Not intentionally, maybe, not consciously puffed up, but this kind of belief that, oh, I should be better than that. I should do better than that. I remember even, talk about arrogance, when I first heard that the whole teaching that living beings are driven by our wish to be happy and to avoid suffering, I thought, oh, come on, surely we have more noble aims than that. Arrogant. We don't. It is as basic as that. And it's true. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with that. So if we can get into the stream a little bit and think, I'm just an ordinary sentient being like everybody else. I have a great opportunity right now. I have incredible conditions right now. I have conditions that most people on the planet don't even know exist to even aspire for. That's true. And I'm an ordinary living being with this opportunity to transform that. Wasting our energy about, and I'm not worthy of it, doesn't get us anywhere. Now, it takes a long time to change our faults. I hope that's not news to anybody. And I hope it's not disappointing. It takes a really, really long time. And we don't do it by, like assigning ourselves a workbook necessarily about, when I quit smoking years ago, I did it by workbook. It was super helpful. You do this exercise, you stop doing this, you start doing that. You can measure week by week by week the decline. You're not smoking so much, you're smoking less, you're feeling better about it. End of workbook, done. I think that's the time it took. I quit many times, but finally it took. It's been about 30 some odd years. But this isn't a workbook for that. There are methods and there are steps, and then we just do them. We just do them. Every day you go in and you do your practice, you learn the antidotes, you learn to apply what needs to be done. People correct you, you flare up, you get into fights with people, you try to fix it. I mean, day by day by day by day by day, we just live following this Buddha's guidelines. And in that way, we grow and change. So it's another place that feeds our lack of self-confidence when we look at ourselves and go, I went to Vajrasattva, I promised last night I will never be angry again, and today I have already blown up at breakfast. What kind of jerk am I? I'm not a practitioner. Yeah? We're back to Robina's have some humility. Have some humility. We've had these afflictions since beginningless time. We've worked on them some, or we wouldn't be here. And we've not worked on them quite enough, because we still have them, but we are working at it. So we also have to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves and go on, not beat ourselves up about it. Venerable Children writes, the measure of our practice is how you deal with daily life situations. True. That's really the measure of our practice. It's not the workbook checklist. How do we deal with daily life situations? Somebody corrects me, I snap back. Somebody corrects me, I snap back. Somebody corrects me, I snap back. Somebody corrects me, I keep my mouth shut. Somebody corrects me, I snap back. Oh, shoot. Somebody corrects me, next time I keep my mouth shut again. Slowly, somebody corrects me, I think, oh, that's useful advice. But it takes time. It's not a measurable quantity. We don't learn it by studying the books. We learn it by living. And that's why living in community is so very precious for this. If we use the community as our mirror, that's when we get to see how much we've grown or not grown over the course of time. It's to show us where we still need work, and it shows us how much we've grown. Which brings us to the issue of transparency here. We have to be open. I mean, you don't have to be, you can stay closed the whole time. But the more open we are about being able to reveal ourselves, reveal what we're thinking, what our doubts are, what our questions are, also what our insights are. Then this too, we use that as the mirror. Then the community can reflect back what we're seeing, we work with it, we interact with each other and grow together as a community. So that's the main part about this self-confidence, good enough business. What are some of your own experiences with this, or doubts or questions about that piece? And then we'll go to the antidotes. Places where you see that the not good enough mind comes up that we haven't touched on, or maybe that we have. Yeah.
I've seen it come up in relationship to study. For me, a big part of it is I don't know enough. You know, I don't have this list memorized. I haven't studied this text. And so in that regard, it's then, okay, let me read as many books as possible, or whatever it is, that feeling of, you know, I don't know enough yet, and I have to fix that, and I have to do it on my own, not just study what we're studying. That somehow there's a deficiency there to fix.
Yeah, got it. So trying to learn it all, grab it all, get it all, and then I'll know. And then I can be confident. Yeah. Melinda, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've just noticed that I get embarrassed about something that I've done, and recently I've kind of tried to use that as a way to connect with others who have also experienced that sense of embarrassment, and just try to use those moments and recollect them. Then even days after, not necessarily beating myself up, but just having compassion for somebody else who might be experiencing that same thing.
Yeah, nice. That helps a lot. Recognizing it, the similarities with others and going, oh yeah, I know how that feels. May they be happy. Yeah, good. Cynthia, you had one?
Guilt when I'm sick or I have something in my body that I cannot fulfill the full schedule.
Anybody else ever had that? Yeah. The body over which we have zero control, creating a condition, karmic ripening, and then we feel guilty and terrible about it, and ashamed that we can't contribute or something. Yeah, that's a very good sign of the not good enough. Because, you know, the opposite then, if I'm good enough, I mean, I have to prove that I'm good enough. So I give my work, I give my part, I contribute, I do the thing. Yeah. Whereas, you know, just using every situation that arises as our practice. I mean, training our minds to do that too, so that whatever situation arises, then okay, I'm sick. How do I practice with this? And seeing that my practice is my contribution. I just read a thing, probably it was in this list, where Venerable was saying again, well, she has said this a couple of times in the last few days, we don't come here to be fantastic website developers. We don't come here to be the best fundraisers. We don't come here to be the best teachers. We don't come here to be the best sawyers. That's not the purpose. It looks like it sometimes because we offer offering service is so much a part of our training. But offering service is our training. It's not our career. And it's our training to both purify, to create merit, which we need, and it's all part of our practice to become liberated and fully awakened, to generate our bodhicitta and so forth. So it's so, especially if we've all been in the professional work world, it's so hard to get off that horse of where my value, it depends on my success level and how good a job, what job I have and how good a job I do, and getting the feedback for it. And if you're sick, what good are you, right? Yeah. So these are all afflicted minds. To recognize that mind is an affliction is important. Is important. Is that another point you want to make? Yeah.
Also being oversensitive.
Ah, yes. Go on.
Being oversensitive.
Yeah, what about it?
Oh, like that's the not good enough mind.
Yes.
When we're oversensitive about what people tell us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't even say oversensitive, just sensitive. Just sensitive about what people say to us is the not good enough mind. Yeah, it could be over, but even less than oversensitive, just sensitive.
Can be hypersensitive. Hypersensitive.
Yeah, hypersensitive.
Could I just add one thing? Could I actually go a step further with that and saying, could we actually be grateful for these faults, these afflictions, even though we want to overcome them, but be grateful for them, because how can we relate to others without having experienced those ourselves?
That's turning it into dharma. As long as you're not saying I want to be angry because all my friends are angry. But if you say I can appreciate that I do
Right.
have anger,
That's
and
what
that teaches me both how to work with it myself and
Right.
and how to have compassion for others.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Kenru.
I don't know. Sometimes I just happen to see that I just want to rush everything. Like I want to be kind and I want to be compassionate, and then I do everything. At the end of the day, it's like I overexert myself, and then my body got ache. And I realized I'm attaching to happiness, the euphoric feeling whenever they're being kind.
Oh. So it's being kind for the sake of feeling good about it. Over offering, over performing, over kinding. Not because I have this feeling of a kind heart per se, but because I want the good feeling of thinking that I do. Yeah. It's somewhere between people pleasing and codependence, I think, that falls. Yeah, we've had this discussion before. It's easy to go there. Yeah. Karen, did you have something? Yeah.
But in relation to what Kanri said, so I think, so I used to run around a lot, like in the center where I was volunteering, and then I was really tired. But so in the end, I noticed I couldn't continue that way, so I started to do it less. But then the fear comes that I'm not good enough, that I'm using the resources of the center for just being lazy and things like that. So I don't know if this is also one in that direction.
Yes, that's definitely in that direction too. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not so clear. You know, I was just thinking as you were talking, I have been accused of being a workaholic for most of my life. I haven't heard that word lately. But I also like to work. I do. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. So to find the line internally to what is working for the praise, or what is working to prove my worth, because I certainly have that, and what is working because I just enjoy what I'm doing. And then, of course, we want to offer service whether we're enjoying what we're doing or not. Then we work with our mind to try to make it enjoyable. So there's many different lines inside. And I guess that takes us to the first of these antidotes that I want to talk about that come from these Dharma principles. Because number one in this case, I think, is mindfulness, is the Dharma principle. Venerable Children writes, mindfulness entails being aware of our precepts, values, and practices, and living according to them as much as we can. So here she's not talking about mindfulness in the context of concentration meditation, where we are remembering our object and returning to it again and again. But we are remembering the object of our precepts, our values, and our practices. So we are remembering the object of how we have chosen to want to live. And we're mindful to see that we are living according to these values. She says, for example, by being mindful of our precepts, we're attentive to act according to them. Being mindful of love and compassion, we bring those attitudes into whatever situation we are in and whomever we have contact with. So it's bringing that awareness of what's going on in my mind to this idea of, am I being run by my sense of unworthiness at this moment? Or am I accepting who I am and coming from a place that wishes to benefit others? As long as I'm in doubt about my worthiness, my sole focus is on who? It is totally an all-consuming, self-considered thought. I'm sorry to break anybody's bubble about that, but it is. And the self-centered thought is the one that, from the bodhisattva point of view, is the biggest obstacle that we have towards being able to be of any benefit to others whatsoever. If we want to grow our love, we want to grow our compassion, we want to develop empathy, we want to develop even basic equanimity, constantly doubting our own worthiness is just like a big boulder in front of us. It's measured against, and then what will they think of me? Right? Always obstacle there. She also talks about mindfulness in terms of slowing down. Who said slow down? Somebody. Kenru. Yeah. Oh, Karen. Kenru. Anyway, somebody said about slowing down. Slow down and be more attentive to what we're thinking, feeling, saying, and doing. So mindfulness in community life, that's really different from sitting on the cushion with Goenka, where you're not allowed to move for 10 hours at a stretch. We are moving here. We're moving 10 hours at a stretch. And so mindfulness then goes to what's going on in my mind as I do this. What's going in my mind and my heart when I'm in communication with other people? What's going on in my body when I'm moving through space? And with that kind of mindfulness, then we're able to, once we brought this to this awareness of this self-doubt, this not good enough mind, as once we brought that to the surface, then we can also use mindfulness to check, where am I coming from with this? Where am I coming from? Because it's not the loudest voice, in my experience. Do you agree? It's not the loudest voice I have, but it's a kind of an underground murmur. Good enough, good enough, good enough, good enough. As soon as I'm measuring anything about myself, good enough is under there. She says, practicing mindfulness and compassion in our daily interactions at the Abbey prevents our bodhicitta meditation from becoming abstract. So we can also use this mindfulness in meditation to, just to watch how the doubts come up. Any other thoughts on mindfulness? The next great antidote is gratitude and respect. And that's a terrific antidote to this not good enough mind. She says, when we're grateful for the goodness around us and respect others' excellent qualities and beneficial deeds, our own hearts open and we can progress on the path. Now, observing the people around us and having gratitude and respect for their goodness is different from observing the people around us and having jealousy for their good qualities. We can have either reaction. And if we're mindful of what's going on in our mind, that's where we begin to really see, oh, I am following this affliction of jealousy. We'll get to rejoicing later, but also just to be grateful. And this meditation on the kindness of others is so valuable for so many different afflictions in our mind. If we look at the kindness of others in this context of, am I good enough? If we don't compare it, we recognize and see that there is kindness everywhere, and I'm part of it. I'm part of that kind network. If I see kindness everywhere out there, I start to recognize more and more my own kindness as well, that we just take for granted. We don't even notice it. It's so kind of much a part of things. So this is a great place for recognizing. And then that lifts our own sense of self-confidence and reduces the doubt about our good enoughness. When we see the really simple acts of kindness around us, and see them as acts of kindness, then we see how each person contributes and that everybody's contribution, no matter how small, quote, small, affects other people. That brings that to awareness about our own kind actions. And that lifts our self-confidence. I mean, it may sound silly, I'm worthy because I took the tea wrappers and put them in the recycle bin. That makes me worthy of nothing. Not so. This was a kind action that integrated with the whole life of the community and the life of the planet even. It's something to rejoice in, not to get puffed up about, but to recognize that, yes, there's value here. It doesn't take walking in a big parade and spotlights and stuff. Gratitude and respect cannot be forced. We can't make ourselves feel them. Rather, they are traits that we consciously cultivate because we see their benefit. So training ourselves to recognize others' good qualities develops respect for them. It's an antidote to the comparing mind. And when we recognize, as I just said, we recognize others' good qualities, we also start to recognize that we have some too. When we respect others, we also have greater respect for ourselves. It goes both ways. The more we respect ourselves, the more we can respect others. But depending on how big your inner hole is, I think it might be good to start outside. I can see those good qualities, and then I can see my own later. The next one is humility and willingness to accept instruction. It's funny that those are actually, well, it makes sense, but that they're both on the same line, I find interesting. Humility makes us willing to accept instruction. She says, humility is different from low self-esteem, for it is based on self-confidence. Because we are confident and like ourselves, we don't have to prove ourselves to others, dominate them, or have the last word in a discussion. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is an excellent example of someone who is humble and respects all others. I watched this film, The Jew and the Lotus. I think it was The Jew and the Lotus. Did you see this documentary? It's quite old now, but it was a documentary about the time that His Holiness brought a bunch of Jewish scholars from around the world to Dharamsala because he wanted advice on how the Jewish culture had been able to be maintained over centuries and centuries and centuries of oppression and the great Jewish diaspora, which keeps kind of happening. So for the sake of the Tibetan culture, preserving that over the planet now, where Tibetans are all over the world, looking for advice on how to maintain that culture. And in this documentary, what I saw that really took my attention was that there were rabbis from all these different streams of Judaism, and I don't know Judaism well enough to know what they were, but they were scholars, they were rabbis, they were the leaders from various forms. And there was an old rabbi who was a specialist in Kabbalah. And he was the old style with the long, curly curls and the long white beard and the black hat and the black clothes. And I think he might have been the only one who was dressed so much like that. Clearly a different strain from the majority of the group that was sitting with His Holiness. And so they had their conversations and they would, talk. I'm not sure what they all said. But then this old rabbi got off on a tear and was going on and on and on and on about some mystical kind of obscure point of Judaism. And the rabbis all around him were getting increasingly uncomfortable. You could see them, they were starting to do this, and they were, some of them were barely able to contain rolling their eyes after a while, and he just kept talking and talking and talking. But His Holiness was absolutely rapt, completely absorbed in what this man was saying, so present with him. I thought, that is an example of someone who really cares about living beings. So utterly, utterly respectful. And a kind of humility in that, of His Holiness's willingness, even when all the other rabbinical scholars did not want to hear another word from this man about the Kabbalah, His Holiness was totally present and willing to be with him. So that's the kind of respect that comes from actually recognizing the good, the heart of each being, that comes from the kind of compassion that His Holiness has for each and every one of us, and his capacity to see each of us. I don't have it, but it is something to really aspire for. And when we do that in community, and when we train together as we train with this, then our humility in recognition to our kind of like our place in the community, not like our stature, not our station, but simply a place in the community where we have the humility to be a part of the community, here, contribute without doubt and also without arrogance. That's what I think is the beauty of this particular value. And so then, this willingness to accept instruction helps us grow. Our capacity to accept instruction helps us grow. She says, being able to accept feedback gracefully shows respect for our teachers and our companions on the path. When teachers or senior monastics remind us to be mindful of our actions, we practice listening and take in their comments with an open mind. When our minds tighten and become defensive, as will sometimes happen, we practice noticing this and remembering that others' comments are offered with care for our well-being and are meant to help us. So this too we grow into. And I guess people have different capacities to start with, but it's not always easy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
when Venerable Samten was doing that series on humility, I started looking at some of the articles that she was drawing from. And what I saw repeatedly in those articles was that things that contribute to humility is, one, knowing your strengths, honestly, not arrogantly, not puffed up, but also knowing your limitations. So if a person, I think the more we can accept both of those things, and sometimes it's harder to accept your strengths than your weaknesses, but the more we can honestly accept those things, then of course you want to take feedback because you have self-confidence knowing your strengths and your limitations.
Yeah.
And then there's more of a space to be open for hearing, where can I improve? Without being threatened by that.
Yeah, I think that's totally on. And the funny thing about strengths, I'm glad you brought this up, because it goes back to this thing about our self not good enough, right? I mean, so many times we've had the exercise here where where Venerable has said, maybe we've had it in discussion groups. I mean, it's come up in different situations where to come up with what are your good qualities. And it is invariably so much easier to come up with a list of our faults than it is to come up with a list of our good qualities. And sometimes I think we don't recognize our good qualities because we're so busy shoring up this I'm not good enough business that we don't look. And if we do look, we're afraid that we're going to get arrogant about it. Or sometimes we are arrogant about it because we have this lack of self-confidence underneath. So this too would be actually a good antidote. I'm glad you brought that up. To actually really think about what are our strengths. And to see that not like what are our talents, not what are our skills, what are our strengths. That's something else. That's something different. Cynthia?
Also, from the world that I come from, which is the business world, you remark or feel your strengths so much that in order to prove yourself, that you are not really able to see your flaws. I mean, you're completely blind for that because you have to reinforce.
Yeah.
So it's like a person that doesn't have a complete body. Like if you have drive, then you're not able to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you have this, then you're not able to have that.
Yeah. I understand what you mean, and I think probably for any one of us that all the time that we worked in professional worlds, whatever the professional world we've in, has had some element of that. Maybe more so in business than in some others. But yeah, definitely. That we putting the strengths so far forward, writing the fancy resume and covering up so that we can't even acknowledge that we have faults. And you shouldn't ever. Yeah, exactly. Good. Something else came to mind when you said that, but let's go on. The other, another of the Abbey founding values that is an antidote, especially to this self-confidence issue, is rejoicing. Rejoicing in our own and others' talents, rejoicing in our own and others' good opportunities, knowledge, abilities, positive potential. Venerable Children writes, is essential for having a happy mind. Essential. And by doing so, we create great positive potential, great merit ourselves. The basic guideline, is to have a happy mind. Venerable will often say that, keep a happy mind. That's our daily practice, keep a happy mind. I think, really? How hard is that? This is a key. Keep a happy mind. To rejoice in our own opportunities, to rejoice in our own good actions, to rejoice actually even when we recognize, I see anger coming up. That is something to rejoice in, because that's not something I saw a month ago or I saw 10 years ago. It's not so great that anger's coming up. That's not what we're rejoicing in. I saw it. And the more I can see it, the more I can catch it. That I can rejoice in. And the more I think that we rejoice, and I know this from my own experience, and I know from my experience of my Dharma sisters mostly, we haven't had too many brothers, but for my Dharma sisters for sure, over the years, to see how this practice of rejoicing in our own good qualities and our own good efforts, our own practice, and the rejoicing in the good qualities of others has so transformed people's minds. It's true for me. Venerable Jigme is nodding. I know that this practice of this practice of rejoicing has had a huge effect on even our capacity as a community. It sure helps your self-esteem. Yeah, Venerable Jigme?
So, regarding that, one of the things that has helped so much is just to recognize that just the way that we're hardwired, we as a species look for the problem, the fearful, the difficult, and so that just is so rote, that just is so bubbling up all the time. And it takes effort to turn the mind to look at what to rejoice in each day. Mm-hmm. It takes practice and effort to do that. It doesn't just somehow come, you know. And so if you don't put the effort into that, you're not going to build it, and you're going to be on the side of, what did I screw up with? What did I do wrong? What did I miss? What was I not just quite enough or good enough about?
Yeah, thank you. It does take effort. Oh, but so rewarding. And somebody recently, I don't know, was it somebody here? Somebody recently was talking to me about, I don't feel very joyful. This rejoicing thing doesn't. And you know, it doesn't matter if you feel really joyful at the beginning. Just do it. Really, it doesn't matter. It will come. The joy will come. But even if you just go rejoicing, okay, I'm rejoicing, I appreciate it. Well, yeah, they did do well. I mean, you catch yourself. You can be cynical about it, and then you catch yourself. Oh, they really did a good job. Oh, look, I did a good job. Look, I let that barb just fly right off. I didn't react or anything. Good for me. Rejoicing. Good for me because it's virtuous, not good for me because I one-upped the person who nailed me, right? It's tricky. Not because I one-upped anybody, but because I caught this as a virtuous mind. I changed what could have been a non-virtuous situation into a virtuous mind. Rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. So good for our self-esteem. Really. And then this last one that's not on the list, on the website that I will put up, is apologizing and forgiving. Apologizing and forgiving. Apologizing means acknowledging our mistakes, acknowledging our harmful intent, and our lack of mindfulness. It is psychologically healthy and relieves us from guilt, allowing us to progress in the present rather than staying stuck in the past. It is spiritually healthy because it enables us to learn from our mistakes and thus to live according to our precepts and better. To live according to our precepts better, to better live according to our precepts in the future. So this takes self-confidence too. To say, oh wow, I messed up, I made a mistake. Sorry, caused harm. I recognize it, I acknowledge it, I regret it. And then I purify it, and on we go. Dwelling on it just sinks us back into the sinkhole of, I'm not good enough. Oh, I did such a terrible thing. And then forgiving means letting go of the anger so that we don't hold grudges or nurture resentment or the wish to retaliate. So just as we apologize, we hope that, we have this feeling of that the other person will have forgiveness for us. What it means simply is putting down anger. That's Venerable's definition. So it's not like somebody can, bless us with a forgiveness. For us, forgiveness is putting down our anger against what we perceive as harm. And so we apologize, we forgive. The more my experience, the more we forgive, the easier it is to apologize. If I'm trying to clean up and not carry grudges, I'm really working on this one right now to see where those little sticky grudges kind of hang in there. Clean those up. The more I'm willing to do that with myself, then the easier it is to acknowledge I made a mistake too. It's not so held so tightly in my mind. You get what I mean? And then she says here, using our confession, our bi-monthly sojang, is a great place. What does she say about this? Gives us an opportunity, because we'd have the lay sojang tonight too. Gives us an opportunity to review our actions of the last half month and to make amends to ourselves, to our Dharma companions, and to the three jewels, which I have neglected to even notice in this whole talk. But who's the witness? I mean, we're practicing with having taken refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Buddha Dharma and Sangha are constantly present there with us, in our minds, in our hearts. And all of these efforts to work with our self-esteem, we do in relationship to the three jewels. Then we've got the best forces to work with. Buddha sat there and told us, you can become awakened. You have the potential to become a Buddha. Do I believe the Buddha? I mean, if I really did, then there would never be any doubt. So that's also part of our practice, as we take refuge more and more deeply to believe that what the Buddha said was true about all different topics. I believe what he said about dukkha. I believe what he said about samsara. Do I believe what he says about Buddha nature? Why not? Then that's mine to work on. That's my koan to work with. So that's the topic. And those are some antidotes. There are very many. Community is a fabulous place to work these. The rock tumbler bangs away, and people consciously and unconsciously remind us of our faults, consciously and unconsciously remind us of our good qualities. The more conscious we are with each other, of course, the less harm, and yet we all have that to work with. And for sure, self-doubt, having low self-esteem, doubting ourselves is a tremendous obstacle to our practice. And we don't have to have it. We can really grow ourselves up. We can grow our self-confidence up so that we take our place as children of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and do what we aspire to do, however that looks. Ask questions or comments? Yeah, Karen.
One thing that you also mentioned today, and I've heard other times too, is that nobody else is worrying about whether we are good or thinking about that even. So I just want to it's not so nice, I think, to say, but maybe other people recognize, because if I really have a lot of a sense of shame or something like this, I actually have this also for other people. I mean, in the sense that I some kind of despair that that there is no goodness anywhere. So I just wanted to, because when I hear this, I think in my own experience that's not quite true. That sometimes I don't want to be like that, but I somehow feel that there is no good solution if I'm really stuck in a shameful mind or something like that. Do you understand what I mean?
I'm not sure I do. Let me see if I get it. So in looking around and seeing that there's so much anger and so forth in the world, and I have that too?
No,
That I have the sense of despair from that?
just like the sense of if you have like a lot of shame in your mind and you think of yourself like you that you're not able, that you don't recognize your own Buddha nature, you don't recognize the good qualities. And I've noticed I can have this for other people too, just because of having some certain sense of this is not possible, so it's not possible for me, it's also not possible for other people.
Because you feel that they don't have, because
Just
I
because
don't
it's not
understand the
possible.
part about having it for other people.
Because I feel it's not possible to have, like, this idea of Buddha nature is not possible for other people either.
I see.
And then there's this kind of, we got to make something nice out of this, but I really don't know how, because, I don't know. It's just, I just wanted to mention this because I've heard this quite often, and I always think, for me, that's not quite true. Because I actually do extend this to other people too, not to make you feel uncomfortable.
Transference of what?
In psychology, there is a term like transference. So my experiences of myself.
Put your mic up a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
So my experience of myself will be transferred to others. In a relationship. So with a psychologist or a mental health therapist, we always have to be aware that the person that you are working with, the client, will transfer their expectations or their experiences onto the therapist, their relationship, the styles and all of that. So I guess that's something that resonates. If I don't have that, others must not have that as well, right? So, and that attitude will be formed accordingly.
Yeah, thanks. So that makes sense to me.
And then there is countertransference, when the person who is receiving that is also reflecting on, hey, there is this attitude and what's mine, and that it creates the ripple effect, I guess. And that, I think, perpetuates that cycle of no exit, where this anger bounces off you and then back to me, and okay.
It went a little further, right? But I think what's useful from the Dharma perspective is to actually study about Buddha nature. What is it? How does it manifest? How do we cultivate our own access to our own Buddha nature, right? So it's not just some personality trait or, and it's also not some magical thing, but it is, I think we can say, an innate. There are qualities of our mind stream that are present, and there's also the emptiness of our mind. And what does that mean? So studying what that Buddha nature, what that Buddha potential really means, I think would help a lot with that. The more we understand, the more we understand that, I think the clearer it gets as to how it is that I actually have it, and you actually have it, and you do too, and you do too, and you do too, and you stop doubting it. But you have to know what it is, quite specifically. So give it a try. And it's it's not an easy topic, actually, Buddha nature. It's not until the end of Volume 3 that Venerable Chödrön and His Holiness the Dalai Lama put it in their little book. Their little series of 10 books. Their masterpiece of the entire encyclopedia of the path to awakening. So it's not a simple idea either. But the more you understand it, the more you study, and the more you recognize that this is really a part of who each of one of us is. When that gets clearer and clearer and clearer, then the pathway to how to cultivate that becomes more possible. Yeah.
Venerable, I have one question. It's regarding, I actually hear thank you in this whole stay in Abbey more than what I experienced in my whole life. So I have difficulties accepting the thank you because I was teaching it like this is my duty. So in future, when we actually do something for the sentient beings and sentient beings make offerings, sentient beings say thank you and appreciation, how can we actually use these? Because I got rather confused that where should I keep this feeling? Because I treat it as a duty, but I don't deserve a thank you. So is it a self-attachment?
Well, where's thank you coming from? It's coming from a sense of gratitude, probably. It might come from someplace else, but it's coming from a genuine sense of gratitude that's coming from the part of the person giving it. That's a virtuous mind. It doesn't have anything to do with you, really. It's not about you. It's the virtuous mind of the person who's recognizing something that they appreciate, they value, they give you thank you. Not about you. Rejoice. Rejoice in their virtue. Rejoice in their recognition, their appreciation. Done. And this is equally true, because one of the things, too, I wanted to bring up is for monastics receiving offerings. If we're coming into it from a place of, I'm not worth this, I shouldn't get this, people shouldn't give, why are people giving me anything? That's coming from all about me. When people are making offerings to the Sangha, they're making offerings to the Sangha. Sangha of the 10 directions. It is not about you at all. If we take the responsibility to be able to give to help people's faith by behaving in ways that represent the Sangha, that's about us. That's us doing our part. But when people make offerings to the Sangha, it's not personal. So our own self-esteem issue is another self-centered thought that just gets in the way of. So it's similar, except the thank you. That's all it is. Okay, thank you so much. May we all grow in great confidence and fulfill our potential. Not race to it, but soon.